My wife, pregnant after years of IVF, promised me she wouldn't drink at her sister's Vegas party. Then a video leaked of her with the best man, not just shattering our marriage, but a dark family secret. My name is Ethan. I build things for a living. I take raw land, blueprints, and a pile of materials, and I create structures that are meant to last. Houses, offices, community centers. For years, I believed I was doing the same thing with my life, with my marriage. I was a partner in my father-in-law's construction firm, a position I didn't inherit but earned with calloused hands and 16-hour days. I thought that by pouring my sweat and soul into his legacy, I was building my own, brick by brick, inside the heart of his family. I was wrong. I wasn't building a home. I was decorating a cage. A beautiful, gilded cage I had mistaken for a sanctuary. Claire and I had been married for 7 years. To anyone looking in, we had the perfect life. A beautiful home in a quiet suburb, 2 good cars in the garage, and a future that seemed as solid as the foundations I poured. But beneath the polished surface, there was a fault line, a deep and aching void that we had spent 5 of our 7 years trying to fill. Our war with infertility was a silent, brutal campaign fought in sterile clinics and quiet, tear-filled nights. It was a landscape of needles, hormone schedules written on the fridge, and the gut-wrenching 2-week wait that always ended in a single, devastating word: no. Each failure felt like a small death, another crack in the foundation of a life we were trying to build. I watched the light in Claire's eyes dim with every negative test, saw the hope drain from her face, replaced by a brittle kind of resilience that frightened me. I poured myself into my work, into providing, into being the steady rock she could lean on, believing that my strength could somehow will our dream into existence. And then, after our 3rd and final attempt at IVF, it happened. 2 blue lines, a blood test confirmation, a tiny, flickering heartbeat on a grainy ultrasound screen. Claire was pregnant, 12 weeks pregnant. The moment the doctor confirmed it, I felt a kind of peace I'd never known. It was more than just joy. It was relief. The war was over. We had won. This baby wasn't just a child. It was a testament to our endurance, a living symbol of every tear, every dollar, every prayer we had poured into our shared dream. I thought, naively, that this was it. The foundation was finally set. Now we could just live. But the family I had married into didn't just live, they performed. My father-in-law, Robert, was a force of nature. A big, charismatic man with a booming laugh and a handshake that could crush stone. He commanded every room he entered, and his world revolved around 2 things: the success of his business and the perfection of his family's public image. They were inextricably linked, especially now, with a massive merger on the horizon that would elevate the company to a new stratosphere. My mother-in-law, Carol, was a silent, elegant lieutenant, the enforcer of this flawless image, her approval a currency more valuable than gold in their social circle. And at the center of their universe was Claire's younger sister, Olivia. At 28, Olivia was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. She was charming, beautiful, and possessed an effortless sense of entitlement that came from a life without obstacles. I was a reliable, high-performing outsider, respected for the money I made the company, but never truly one of them. I was the son-in-law, a title that always felt conditional. My anchor, my connection to a world outside their gilded cage, was David, my best friend since our dorm days in college, now a sharp, no-nonsense corporate lawyer. He was the one I called after a tense Sunday dinner at Robert and Carol's, the one who could cut through the family's passive-aggressive fog with a single, blunt observation. "They don't see you, man," he'd told me once. "They see a valuable asset." I'd brushed it off at the time, loyal to a fault, but the words had stuck, a splinter under the skin. The announcement came during one of those tense Sunday dinners. Olivia, sparkling with glee, flashed a diamond ring the size of a small planet and announced her engagement. The wedding was to be an extravagant affair in 3 months. And preceding it, of course, was the Bachelorette party. Not a simple dinner or a weekend at a spa. No, Olivia was planning a 3-day spectacle in Las Vegas. The last wild ride. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. It wasn't a vague, overprotective worry. It was a specific fear rooted in a memory I had tried to bury. A few years ago, at a cousin's wedding, Claire had had 2 glasses of champagne. Just 2. But it was like a switch flipped. The quiet insecurity I sometimes glimpsed in her was replaced by a loud, reckless need for attention. She became flirtatious with the groomsmen, her laughter too loud, her dancing too provocative. I spent the night steering her away from trouble, my face burning with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. The fight we had later was ugly, ending with her in tears, promising she understood her limits now, that she would never, ever put us in that position again. So, when she told me she was going to Vegas, I voiced my concerns as calmly as I could. We were in the kitchen, the scent of dinner still hanging in the air. Vegas, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. With Olivia's crew? Claire, we've come too far to risk anything right now. Her face hardened instantly. Risk what, Ethan? Having a little fun? Celebrating my sister? Or do you just not trust me? Of course I trust you. It's not about that. It's Vegas. You know how those things get. Then came the words that fell like a knife. You mean you're afraid I'll embarrass you, she said, her voice dripping with accusation. I'm finally giving you what you've always wanted, the one thing that will make this family perfect, and you still want to keep me in a cage. That is not fair, I said, my voice rising despite myself. This is about you, about the baby, your health, your safety. Her eyes welled with tears, the ultimate trump card. I'll be the sober one, I swear it. I'll just drink club soda and watch the girls have their fun. It's the last time I'll get to do something like this for Olivia. Please, Ethan, don't take this from me. She took my hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. I promise, she whispered, looking me straight in the eye. I promise on our baby's life. Emotional blackmail. I knew it even then, but I was so desperate to maintain the fragile peace, so terrified of being the controlling husband she was painting me as, that I relented. The night before she left, I packed her suitcase. I tucked in a pair of comfortable sneakers alongside the high heels, a reusable water bottle, her prenatal vitamins. The scent of her perfume, a light floral scent I usually loved, filled the air, but now was tinged with my anxiety. As I drove her to the airport, a quiet tension filled the car. I kissed her goodbye at the curb, a long, desperate kiss. You two be safe, I whispered, my hand resting on her belly one last time. We will, she said, smiling brightly. I love you. I watched her walk through the sliding glass doors, disappearing into the terminal. I drove home to an empty, silent house, the echo of her promise hanging in the air, a promise I clung to like a prayer. The 3 days Claire was gone were the longest of my life. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, poring over blueprints until my eyes burned. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from drifting into the dark corners of doubt. I texted her each night. Hope you're having fun. Love you. Her replies were short, bubbly, and filled with exclamation points. Having a blast. So fun. Love you more. She came home on a Sunday night, looking exhausted but radiating an almost manic cheerfulness. I picked her up from the airport, and on the ride home, she was a whirlwind of stories, all of them vague and generic. Oh, it was amazing. The shows were incredible. We saw Cirque du Soleil and the food. Ethan, the food was to die for. It was all just party vibes and girl time. Just what Olivia needed. She painted the entire trip as a harmless, wholesome getaway. Laughter, dancing, sisterhood. When I asked specific questions, who was there? What did you guys do Saturday night? She would deflect. Oh, Olivia's college friends. A bunch of people. We just went to some club. The music was great. She was performing, and I, wanting so badly to believe in the perfect life we were building, was her willing audience. I told myself her distance was just fatigue. Her stories were vague because she was tired. The way she clutched her phone was just a habit. But in the 2 weeks that followed, the cracks in her performance began to show. They were small things, almost imperceptible at first. Her phone, which used to lie face up on the nightstand, was now always placed screen down. A notification would ping, and she'd snatch it up with a speed that felt frantic. In bed, she'd turn away from me, creating a small but deliberate barrier with her pillow. One night, I reached out to place my hand on her stomach, a ritual I'd started, a way to connect with the baby. She flinched, almost violently, before catching herself. "Sorry," she murmured, not looking at me. "I'm just really sore from a workout I did." A plausible lie. Everything she said was plausible, and that was the most insidious part of it. She was making me question my own intuition, making me feel like the crazy, suspicious husband. It was a subtle, creeping gaslighting that left me feeling off balance and deeply alone. The truth arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 14 days after she'd returned from Vegas. It came not with a bang, but with a buzz. I was in my home office, reviewing a set of final blueprints for a new community center, when my phone vibrated on the desk. It was a text from my cousin Mark, not the best man, a different Mark. The message read, "Dude, is this Claire? This is on some local gossip blog. Hope you're okay." Below the text was a link. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A cold sweat prickled my neck. I stared at the link for a full 30 seconds, my mind refusing to process it. With a shaking hand, I clicked. The web page loaded. The headline was cruel and sensational. Local bride's sister gets cozy with groom's best man days before wedding. And below it, the video. It was only 45 seconds long, but it played out in excruciating slow motion, searing every frame into my memory. The footage was shaky, clearly filmed on a phone in a crowded, pulsing nightclub. The bass of the music was a distorted, thumping heartbeat. And there she was, my wife, my pregnant wife. Her pregnancy was barely a whisper beneath the tight, shimmering dress, but I knew it was there. In her hand, unmistakably, was a half-empty champagne flute. Her face, flushed and beautiful, was tilted up, her eyes glazed with a look I hadn't seen since that wedding years ago. She was pressed against a man, her arms locked around his neck. The camera panned, and my stomach dropped into a black hole. It was Mark, the groom's best man. They weren't just talking. They were kissing. Not a drunken peck. It was a deep, lingering, passionate kiss. A kiss of intimacy, of familiarity. As the camera held on them, the crowd around them roared. In the background, for a split second, another face came into focus. It was her sister, Olivia, phone held high, a wide, malicious-looking smirk on her face as she filmed the entire scene. I watched it 3 times back-to-back. My mind wasn't processing betrayal yet. It was stuck on a single, horrifying detail, the champagne flute. The promise. I promise on our baby's life. The lie wasn't just to me. It was to the tiny, fragile life she was carrying. The life we had fought so hard for. I felt a wave of nausea. I pushed back from my desk and stumbled to the bathroom, where I retched into the toilet, nothing but bile coming up. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me was a stranger, his face pale, his eyes wide with a horror I didn't recognize. I walked back to the office, my movement stiff, robotic. I needed to know. I called her into the office. She walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel, a casual, domestic gesture that felt like a scene from another life. "What's up?" she asked, a small smile on her face. My voice, when it came out, was chillingly calm. I didn't recognize it as my own. "Claire, I need you to tell me about Vegas. The real story." Her smile faltered. Her eyes darted around the room, as if looking for an escape route. "What do you mean? I told you. It was fun." Her tone was defensive, her guard instantly up. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't going to confess. She was going to lie. I gave her no room to maneuver. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply turned my laptop screen towards her. "Watch this," I said. I watched her face as the footage played. The color drained from it, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. The video ended, and she just stood there, frozen. "Who sent you that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Her first instinct wasn't remorse. It was to find out who had exposed her. "You're having people spy on me? Does it matter who sent it, Claire? Is that what's important here?" The excuses came then, a frantic, tumbling cascade of lies. It was a dare. It was one kiss. I was drunk. Ethan, they kept pressuring me. You know how Olivia is. It meant nothing. I stood up and walked over to the screen, my finger hovering over the image of the champagne flute in her hand. You promised me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You were drinking while pregnant. She started to sob then, big theatrical tears. I only had one sip, just one, for the toast. And then I watched her mind work, watched her rewrite the narrative in real time, casting herself as the victim and me as the villain. Her grief turned to anger. She looked at me, her face contorted with a rage that stunned me. You know what? I'm glad you saw it, she screamed, the words I would never forget. Maybe now you'll see. This baby, this perfect house, it's the life you wanted. Did you ever stop to ask if I was suffocating in it? The confession. It wasn't about the kiss. It wasn't about the drink. It was about everything. Our marriage, our life, our unborn child. It was all a performance to her, a role she had grown to resent. And in that single, shattering moment, I understood. The ground beneath me didn't just crack. It disintegrated into dust. I didn't say another word. I turned around, walked out of the office, and closed the door, leaving her alone with the ugly truth of what she had just admitted, the sound of her sobs muffled behind the solid wood. I didn't go to the guest room. I went to my home office, locked the door, and sank into my chair, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Claire's screams had faded into desperate, pleading sobs through the door, but her words echoed in my head, a poisonous refrain. Did you ever ask if I was suffocating? The question was a monstrously selfish rewriting of our shared history. We had held each other through every failed cycle, grieved together, celebrated our final success together. Or so I had thought. Now, I saw it was a story I had been telling myself. My first instinct wasn't to rage or to pack a bag. It was to find an anchor in the swirling chaos. I picked up my phone, my hand shaking so badly I had to dial twice. My first call wasn't to my parents or my sister. It was to David. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, man, what's up? I tried to speak, but only a choked sound came out. Ethan, are you okay? You sound awful. I took a deep, shuddering breath and told him everything. The video, the best man, the champagne flute, and Claire's final, devastating confession. I expected him to curse, to rage on my behalf. Instead, his voice became what I desperately needed it to be. Calm, professional, and tactical. Okay, he said, after a long pause. Okay, Ethan, listen to me very carefully. Do not leave the house. You have established residency. Do not engage with her. Do not yell. From this moment on, you're in a legal situation. Everything you do and say can be used later. We act, we don't react. You understand me? Yes. I managed to say the word a dry rasp. Good, he said. Get some sleep if you can. Don't respond to her texts or knocks. Tomorrow morning, we talk strategy. His words were a lifeline. They pulled me out of the drowning pool of raw emotion and placed me on the solid ground of logic and action. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was a man with a problem to solve. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop the only light. David's words, think about past patterns, looped in my mind. I thought about the family dynamic, the unyielding demand for perfection, the way problems were never solved, only hidden. I remembered hushed, angry arguments between Carol and her sister from years ago, a name I hadn't thought of since. Aunt Patty. The black sheep of the family, exiled for some long-forgotten transgression, spurred by a desperate need for context, for any truth outside the family's carefully curated narrative. I started digging. It was 3 a.m. I scoured the internet, cross-referencing old Christmas card lists I found in a desk drawer with public records and social media. It took hours, but finally, I found her. Patricia Donovan, living in a small town in Oregon. With a trembling finger, I saved the number to my phone. I wouldn't call yet. I needed to be ready. The next day, as predicted, the summons came. It was a text from Carol. Ethan, your father and I need to see you. At the house. Now, we need to fix this. Fix this. Not understand it. Not heal it. Fix it. Like a leaky pipe. I walked into their cavernous living room, and it was exactly as I had pictured. An ambush. Robert stood by the fireplace, a titan in his own home. Carol sat on the edge of a pristine white sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Claire was there, sitting beside her mother, her eyes red and swollen, the very picture of a wronged victim. Robert began, his voice a low rumble of disappointment. "Ethan, we're a family, and in this family, we weather storms together. Claire made a silly, drunken mistake, a moment of poor judgment. Your job as her husband, as a man, is to protect her, to forgive her, and to present a united front. This obsession with a single video is selfish, is tearing this family apart right before Olivia's wedding and my merger. You need to let this go." I just stared at him, speechless. He had taken her betrayal and masterfully reframed it as my failure, my lack of grace, my selfishness. Claire said nothing, just looked at me with pleading eyes, a silent request for me to accept the lie, to swallow the poison for the sake of the family's image. I stood up. "I have to go," I said, my voice flat. "This conversation isn't over," Robert boomed. "Yes," I said, turning to look him in the eye. "It is." I walked out of that house and knew I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting my way out of a system so corrupt it would consume me if I let it. I got in my car, drove to a quiet park, and dialed the number for Patricia Donovan. An older woman's voice answered, cautious. "Hello, is this Patricia Donovan?" I asked. "My name is Ethan. I'm Claire's husband." There was a long silence on the other end. "I see," she finally said, her voice softening with something that sounded like pity. "What can I do for you, Ethan?" I told her. I told her about the video, about the family meeting, about how they were trying to frame me as the problem. I didn't even know what I was asking for. Validation, maybe. And then the floodgates opened. Aunt Patty, free from the family censorship for the first time in years, gave me the truth. "They're doing to you what they've always done, son," she said, her voice raspy with old anger. "They're covering for her. They are professional secret keepers." She told me the real story of her exile. In Claire's freshman year of college, she'd had a torrid affair with a married professor. When his wife found out and threatened to expose them, Robert and Carol didn't punish Claire. They went into crisis mode. They paid the professor a small fortune to disappear, quietly ruined his academic career through back channels, and transferred a traumatized Claire to another school, burying the entire incident as if it never happened. Patty was cut off for objecting, for suggesting that Claire needed therapy, not a cover-up. The past wasn't just a pattern. It was a blueprint. My overreaction wasn't crazy. It was the only sane response to a family built on lies. The first twist of the knife was the video. This was the second. It wasn't about a momentary lapse. It was about a lifetime of enabled, destructive behavior. Armed with this new, terrible knowledge, I felt a shift inside me. The grief was still there, but it was crystallizing into something harder, colder: resolve. The final piece of the puzzle came 2 days later. An unknown number texted me. "We need to talk. It's Mark, the best man." My first instinct was to ignore it, but David had advised me to listen to anyone who reached out. We met in a sterile coffee shop halfway between our towns. He looked awful, pale and racked with a guilt that seemed genuine. "I can't go through with it," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I can't stand next to him at the altar." But it wasn't just guilt that had brought him here. It was fear. "Your father-in-law cornered me yesterday," he confessed. "He told me it would be in my best interest to keep my mouth shut. My company does a lot of business with his. He was offering me a bonus, a kickback disguised as a new contract. He was buying my silence, Ethan, and threatening me if I didn't take it." Mark saw that he was just another disposable piece in Robert's game. He was trying to save himself. And to do it, he gave me the weapon I needed. He pulled out his phone. "This wasn't just a drunken mistake," he said, his voice shaking. "It was planned." He showed me the text thread from the week before the Vegas trip. "Claire, I need a break from being the perfect pregnant wife. I need to feel like me again. Mark, Vegas is the place for that. What are you thinking? Claire, a kiss that no one has to know about. A moment that's just ours. Mark, you got it. It'll be our secret. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. A moment that's just ours. It wasn't an impulse. It was a premeditated emotional betrayal, a calculated escape from the very life I thought we were celebrating. Forward them to me, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. The screenshots. Now, he did. As the images loaded on my phone, I felt the last vestiges of the man who had driven his wife to the airport disappear. I forwarded the screenshots to David with a single message, checkmate. His reply came a minute later. Yes, it is. Now we make our move. Quietly, decisively. The victim was gone. A strategist had taken his place. The next 24 hours were a blur of cold, calculated action. I met with David at his downtown office, the city lights twinkling below like a distant, indifferent galaxy. We didn't talk about my feelings. We talked about leverage, about strategy, about the precise application of pressure. The grief and rage that had been a storm inside me were now channeled into a single, focused beam of energy. David, in his element, drafted the letter. It wasn't addressed to the family. It was addressed to Robert's corporate counsel, with a carbon copy to Robert himself. It was a masterpiece of legal threat, written in the cold, dispassionate language of corporate warfare. It mentioned incontrovertible evidence, a conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It noted that the public disclosure of such evidence would constitute a material breach of the fiduciary duties required by the SEC, putting the pending multi-million-dollar merger in serious jeopardy. It concluded not with a demand, but an offer, one chance to discuss a swift, silent, and equitable separation to avoid mutual destruction. This letter, David said, sliding it across his polished mahogany desk, is a declaration of war, but it gives them the option to surrender unconditionally before the first shot is fired. They will be terrified. They won't know exactly what you have, but they'll know it's enough to burn their whole world down. He sent the letter via a secure courier. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was walk into the rehearsal dinner and watch them squirm. I arrived at the lavish country club that evening dressed in my best suit. As I walked through the ornate doors, a hush fell over the room. The air was thick with tension. The fake smiles of the guests barely concealed the panic in their eyes. The family knew. They had received the letter. I saw Robert standing with a group of business partners, his booming laugh sounding forced and hollow. Carol was fluttering around the room like a ghost, her face a mask of strained composure. Claire, seated at the head table, looked small and broken, her eyes darting towards the door every few seconds. She was waiting for me. They all were. Robert intercepted me before I could take 2 steps. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and steered me toward a secluded alcove overlooking the golf course. His face, usually ruddy and confident, was pale and drawn. The charismatic tyrant was gone, replaced by a scared old man. "What do you want, Ethan?" he hissed, his voice a low, desperate whisper. The bravado was gone. The lecture about family loyalty was gone. All that remained was raw, terrified negotiation. I didn't look at him. I looked past his shoulder toward Claire. She was watching us, twisting her napkin in her hands. "I wanted a family," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of my shattered dreams. "I wanted honesty. I wanted the life you all pretended to offer me." I finally turned to look him in the eye. "But since that's not on the table, I'll settle for what's in my lawyer's letter." "You wouldn't," he breathed, a vein throbbing in his temple. "You wouldn't destroy this family. Your own child. My child." I cut him off, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "My child was in my wife's womb while she was drinking champagne and planning a secret rendezvous. My child became a pawn in your game of public image. Don't you dare speak to me about my child." I let the words hang in the air, a final, damning indictment. "You have my terms," I continued, my voice returning to a flat, businesslike tone. "You will give me a clean and full exit from the business. My shares bought out at top market value. There will be no discussion about alimony. Claire will sign an uncontested divorce petition, citing irreconcilable differences. If any of these terms are violated, if there's any delay, the entire file of evidence I have, the text, the video, a sworn affidavit from Mark about your attempt to bribe him, and Aunt Patty's testimony about your history of cover-ups. Goes directly to the board of the company you're merging with, and to the press. Am I clear? He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes and knew he had lost. He gave a single, jerky nod. Defeated. I walked away from him, my steps steady. I walked to the head table, to the seat next to Claire that had been left empty for me. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. For a fleeting second, I saw the woman I had once loved, a broken, fragile person trapped in a system that had created her. But it was a second of pity, not love. The love was gone, burned away. I didn't say a word to her. I reached into my pocket, took out my heavy gold wedding ring, and placed it silently on the table, next to her untouched glass of water. It made a soft, final clink against the crystal. "Goodbye, Claire," I said softly, for her ears only. Then I turned, and without a backward glance, I walked out of that room, out of that life, the silence behind me more satisfying than any screaming match could ever have been. The power was mine. The aftermath was swift and silent, just as David had predicted. The wedding was postponed indefinitely due to a sudden family emergency. The gossip blogs had a field day, but the real story, my story, remained private. My exit from the company was handled with ruthless efficiency. The money was in my account within a week. The divorce papers were signed without contest. It was all clean, sterile, and transactional. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I received a formal, one-sentence email from her lawyer. It informed me that Claire had suffered a miscarriage. The news hit me with a strange, hollow ache. It wasn't the sharp pain of a fresh wound, but a deep, phantom grief for a future that had never been, for the innocent child caught in the crossfire of our collapsed world. It was a tragedy, a life of chaos, culminating in a quiet, devastating loss. I grieved, but I grieved alone. 1 year later, the scene is different. No more manicured suburbs or opulent country clubs. I'm standing on a dusty construction site under a bright, clear sky. It's a smaller project, a library for a small town. A sign hammered into the dirt reads, "Ethan James Construction, foundations you can trust." My own company, my own name, my own terms. I'm holding a blueprint, the paper flapping in the breeze, sketching a modification with a pencil. I am calm. I am focused. I am free. The anger is gone, replaced by a hard-won peace. The bitterness has faded into a kind of somber understanding. I had to tear down my entire life, raise it to the very ground, to build a new foundation, one based on truth, not illusion. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most necessary. My new life isn't perfect, but it's real, and it is mine. It makes me wonder, and it's something I want to ask all of you who have taken the time to listen to my story. How do you find the strength to walk away, to tear everything down when your heart, your history, and everyone around you is telling you to stay and fight for a beautiful lie? I look forward to reading your stories and your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening.